Hello, my name is Andrea, and this is High Literature, a program where I introduce books and comics and stories and art to you, the viewer. Today, I'm going to do something a little different. We're first going to start with books, and then we're going to finish with comics. So, strap in, we got a lot to talk about. I was on social that's I was trying to remember where I saw it. There was this video that was posted about, so there's this account that does these interactions with plant life, and she did this thing where the video was about like how plants react to music. And I was at work, and when I'm at work, I try not to do a lot of social media, particularly if it's videos with sound. But if it's something that like I'm interested in but I can't watch or listen to, then I just read the comments and see what they have to say. And they were so interesting, and there was this one comment in particular that really grabbed my attention. And it was somebody saying how every day during her walk to work, she would pass like this garden of lilies. And there is one lily in particular that she found particularly beautiful. And every day she would talk to this lily. And as time passed and all the flowers started to die, the lily that she spoke to every day was the last lily to wilt away and die. And I just thought that was one of the most lovely, most heartbreaking things I ever read. It just, I mean, can you imagine what a short little romance to have with a flower? It was really cool. And then at the same time, a friend of mine sent me this funny video about it was somebody just talking about like the trauma that we experienced as children watching The Never-Ending Story. And I know you already know what scene I'm going to talk about. It's when Artax, the horse, dies, and just how nightmarish and awful that scene was for young children to watch. And reading that comment about the flower, and then seeing that video that the friend of mine sent about Artax dying in the swamps of sadness, reminded me that I have been wanting to do a video about books and movies, particularly The Never-Ending Story and The Brave Little Toaster and The Princess Bride. These are examples of books and movies where the movie actually does a better job portraying the emotions and just the energy of the scene, which doesn't often happen. You don't hear too much about the movie being better than the book, but once in a while this goes down. So I used to have The Princess Bride, the book, but it got lost in this shipping disaster that you hear me talk about sometimes. I'll never get over it. But so this was, God, I was still in my 20s, and I was living in Los Angeles, and I was just pottering around a Barnes and Noble, and I saw a copy of The Princess Bride. And at this point, I had no idea that this was a book. I only knew of this story as a movie. So I buy the book, and I found out years later with the help of the internet that I am not the first, I am not the only person to do this, but I read the book. This is so embarrassing, but I wasn't the only one. William Goldman writes so convincingly that, so as you know, the movie, it's The Princess Bride is a story that's being told from grandfather to grandson by way of him reading from a storybook. And so the book, as you're reading it, it goes back and forth between regular font and italics. And when it goes to italics, that indicates that we are not in the world of the Princess Bride. We're now in the world where it's the grandfather reading to the grandson. Only in the book, if I remember correctly, it's father and son, not grandfather and grandson. Not that it matters, but so in the book, and it's not even the like it's written as William Goldman is like the father, and it's been a long time since I've read this book. And when it goes to the italics where it's, we're in the real world, he talks about Gilda in such a way, and the cliffs of insanity, and just all these different locations in the book. I thought it was real. I thought it was real. And I just had these travel plans. I was gonna go to all these places. And yeah, it's fantasy. It's not a real thing. But if you look online, I promise I'm not the only person. There are so many people. I mean, you just have to read this book. He writes. I mean, it's so convincing. I really. And I'm not. People will, who know me, will, they would say, "Well, Andrew, you are a very gullible, naive person." Yes, I know. I like to believe. I just want so much to believe. But yeah. Not real places. It's all fantasy. Other than that, the book is wonderful. The movie is wonderful, but the ending is so bad. So in the movie, as we know, Inigo defeats the Count, avenges the death of his father. Physique finds, 3 white horses, and they're all able to escape. Buttercup jumps from the window. Physique catches her, catches everybody. Everybody jumps, and Physique catches everybody. They get on the horses. They ride away off into the sunset. They escape Prince Humperdinck, and just happily ever after, the end. That is not what happens in the movie. As they're escaping from the prince, Inigo's wound reopens. Buttercup's horse throws a shoe. Wesley starts slipping back into almost dead. And Physique is freaking out and lost and doesn't know what to do. And meanwhile, Prince Humperdinck and his men are fast approaching. And then Wesley's men from his ship, because he's the Dread Pirate Robert, so he's got this whole crew of people. And they come and rescue them. They get on the ship. They sail away. Prince Humperdinck's ships that were originally ready to set sail, after the wedding, that wasn't going to take place because he was going to kill Buttercup. But, all the ships are ready because, nobody else knew that. So they all set off. They're chasing our heroes. And they learn from one of the crewmen that there is this magical whirlpool that guards this island that nobody can get to because this whirlpool just kills everybody that tries to approach for whatever reason. It's just a malevolent whirlpool. So they decide that Physique will be strong enough to defeat this whirlpool, so they go for the island. They jump overboard. Wesley, Buttercup, Inigo, Physique, and they're all swimming, physics swimming with everybody, and defeats the whirlpool. They get to the island, and now they're stuck on this island. And nobody can get to them or rescue them because of the whirlpool. But it's okay because Prince Humperdinck and his men can't get to them either. So they're trapped on this island, and they're trying to just make the best of their situation. And Buttercup has a baby. Like, so much happens after that does not take place in the book after the movie ends, and for the better. The movie ending so much better, because then, so Buttercup and Wesley, they have a baby, and Physique is just in love with this baby. He's basically like the godfather of this child. And one day, there's this mysterious figure that appears on the island out of nowhere. Nobody knows how this person got there, and he kidnaps the baby. And all we can assume is that it's one of Humperdinck's men that somehow figured out how to get onto the island, and he's still, like, you know, seeking vengeance because that's what villains do. And this mystery person kidnaps Buttercup and Wesley's baby, and Physique is now chasing after this person to rescue the baby. Chases them all the way to the end of the island. There's a cliff. This person takes the baby, throws the baby over the cliff. Physique jumps off the cliff, jumps after the baby, catches the baby midair. The end. And that's how the book ends. We don't know what happens afterwards. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of that ending. So the movie, better than the book. Another example of the book being better than the movie. And so these examples that I'm going to give, I noticed in these two stories another similarity that I just find very interesting. So we're going to start with The Neverending Story. Now, as some of you probably already know, The Neverending Story, great movie, and then there was a sequel that's, you know, it's okay. It's not terrible. It's, you know, not as good as the first one, but it stands on its own. It's a good movie. So the book, the way it works is, let's see here, and we're gonna go all the way to here. Yeah, that's pretty 50-50. So the first half of the book is the first movie. And then the second half of the book is what the sequel of the movie is all about. So as you know, the nothing is spreading over Fantasia. In the book, Fantasia is called Fantastica. And the childlike empress is dying. And Fantasia, Fantastica, we'll say Fantastica because we're talking about, well, I don't know. I'm just going to go back and forth because we're talking about both the book and the movie. Whatever. The childlike empress is dying. The nothing is spreading. Everything all over Fantasia is disappearing. And I'm trying to remember. I feel like in the movie, Atreyu doesn't find out what's going to save the childlike empress until towards the very end, when the childlike empress herself tells Atreyu that she needs a new name. Well, in the book, Atreyu finds out pretty early on that in order to save the childlike empress, she needs a new name. And long, crazy story short, because a lot of things happen, obviously, in the book that doesn't happen in the movie, but Bastian, like, breaks through reality into fantasy, goes to the other side, gives the childlike empress a new name, and the movie ends. And then in the second movie and in the next half of the book, so in the movie, when the childlike empress gives Bastian the one grain of sand, that's all that's left of her vast realm. In the book, he takes that grain of sand and he uses it to create a new world that he wishes for, because as you may recall, he can wish for things. And basically, as a storyteller, because in the book, in the movie, he's just really into books, same as in the book, and he just loves stories, and he's just really good at like naming things and like coming up with ideas for all kinds. He was a very imaginative boy, and so he takes this grain of sand and wishes for something called what is it? Paralin, the night forest, and so every night this beautiful forest springs up, and then every day when the sun comes up, the forest deteriorates, and it creates this desert of colors, with all the colors being like the different colors of the flowers that existed in the night forest. And it's just, I could go on and on and on and on and on about this book. It's really, really good. People that, when you kind of look back and like dust off those memories, you're like, that part 2 wasn't so great. I encourage you to revisit it. And I strongly suggest you get the book and read the book, watch the movie, watch the movies, share them with your kids, your nephews, your nieces, kids you're babysitting for. I don't care. Just got to spread the word of the Neverending Story and the movies. It's just so good. So we're going to go to, and also this book does that thing where it goes back and forth between like the text goes from regular to italicized. When it's in italics, that's when we are in the real world with Bastian in the attic at the school. And then in the regular font, we're in Fantastica. So we're going to talk about the death of Artax. Now, as we know, everybody who's seen the movie, when Artax dies, it's so sad. When it happens here, not so much. And I have a theory as to why. And we're going to get into that. Okay. So, let's see here. One morning, when time seemed to be standing still in the murky light, he looked out from a hilltop and finally glimpsed the swamps of sadness. Clouds of mist drifted over them. Here and there he distinguished little clumps of trees, their trunks divided at the bottom into 4, 5, or more crooked stilts, which made the trees look like great many-legged crabs standing in the black water. From the brown foliage hung aerial roots resembling motionless tentacles. It was next to impossible to make out where there was solid ground between the pools of water and where there was only a covering of water plants. Artax whinnied with horror. "Are we going in there, master?" "Yes," said Atreyu, "we must find Tortoiseshell Mountain. It's at the center of those swamps." He urged Artax on, and Artax obeyed. Step by step he tested the firmness of the ground, but that made progress very slow. At length Atreyu dismounted and led Artax by the bridle. Several times the horse sank in, but managed to pull himself loose. But the farther they went into the swamps of sadness, the more sluggish became his movements. He let his head droop and barely dragged himself forward. "Artax," said Atreyu, "what's the matter?" "I don't know, master. I think we should turn back. There's no sense in all this. We're chasing after something you only dreamed about. We won't find anything. Maybe it's too late even now. Maybe the childlike empress is already dead, and everything we're doing is useless. Let us turn back, master. Atreyu was astonished. Artax, he said, you've never spoken like this. What's the matter? Are you sick? Maybe I am, said Artax. With every step we take, the sadness grows in my heart. I've lost hope, master, and I feel so heavy, so heavy. I can't go on. But we must go on, cried Atreyu. Come along, Artax. He tugged at the bridle, but Artax stood still. He had sunk in up to his belly, and he made no further effort to extricate himself. Artax, cried Atreyu, you mustn't let yourself go. Come, pull yourself out or you'll sink. Leave me, master, said the little horse. I can't make it. Go on alone. Don't bother about me. I can't stand the sadness anymore. I want to die. Desperately, Atreyu pulled at the bridle, but the horse sank deeper and deeper. When only his head emerged from the black water, Atreyu took it in his arms. I'll hold you, Artax, he whispered. I won't let you go under. The little horse uttered one last soft neigh. You can't help me, master. It's all over for me. Neither of us knew what we were getting into. Now we know why they are called the swamps of sadness. It's the sadness that has made me so heavy. That's why I'm sinking. There's no help. But I'm here too, said Atreyu, and I don't feel anything. You're wearing the gem, master, said Artax. It protects you. Then I'll hang it around your neck, Atreyu cried. Maybe it will protect you too. He started to take the chain off his neck. No, the little horse whinnied. You mustn't do that, master. The glory was entrusted to you. You weren't given permission to pass it on as you see fit. You must carry on the quest without me. Atreyu pressed his face into the horse's cheek. Artax, he whispered. Oh, my Artax. Will you grant my last wish? The little horse asked. Atreyu nodded in silence. Then I beg you to go away. I don't want you to see my end. Will you do me that favor? Slowly Atreyu arose. Half the horse's head was already in the black water. Farewell, Atreyu, my master, he said, and thank you. Atreyu pressed his lips together. He couldn't speak. Once again he nodded to Artax, then he turned away. Bastian was sobbing. He couldn't help it. His eyes filled with tears, and he couldn't go on reading. He had to take out his handkerchief and blow his nose before he could go on. Atreyu waited and waited. For how long, he didn't know. The mist grew thicker, and he felt as if he were blind and deaf. It seemed to him that he had been wandering around in circles for hours. He stopped worrying about where to set his foot down, and yet he never sank in above his knees. By some mysterious means, the childlike empress's amulet led him the right way. So, that was sad, but I am willing to bet if you're to take 20 children and have them read that scene, and then take those same 20 children and have them watch that scene from the movie, you would have 20 crying kids after the movie. I don't know if reading this, that would make many kids cry. I'm not saying that it's badly written. I'm not saying that it's, that Michael Ende failed as a writer. It's a moving scene. It's a sad scene. But I don't think if I were to have read this book in my childhood, that it would have had the same lasting effect, the same impact on me that seeing that movie scene did. And this is coming from a kid, I was in the 3rd grade when I read Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. And that book messed me up. And it's just, I don't know, it's different. The scene in that movie when Artax gets sucked under the swamps of sadness versus the scene in the actual book. And the difference, why it's different, I'm going to get to in a second because I have one more example. So, another movie that I loved as a kid and was also very disturbed by was The Brave Little Toaster. So last year, while I was here at work, we were having some issues with the TV. And so I pulled up the YouTube app and was just trying to play stuff that was, like kid friendly. And for whatever reason, I was like, I haven't seen The Brave Little Toaster in a while. So I put that on, found it on YouTube. And I noticed in the opening credits that that movie is based on a novella. And so I look it up and I found a PDF of this story. It's by Thomas Disch, and he wrote this book. He also wrote a sequel, The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, that was also made into an animated sequel. I have not seen The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, but I'm very curious. But when I ran this movie, it had been so long since I had played it, but I remembered that for an animated kids film, like The Land Before Time, like All Dogs Go to Heaven, like The Secret of Nim, even though it's a kids movie, it was stressful, and there were parts about it that were really disturbing. And there was one scene in particular that I was really excited to see again because I was just curious if it would have the same effect on me. And it did. It's this scene where so the appliances, they managed to get out of the summer cabin. And because what they're trying to do is these appliances, every summer this family comes to stay, but they hadn't been in a while, and the appliances are like getting lonely for their owners. It's very, whoever created Toy Story was definitely a Brave Little Toaster fan. So they want to be reunited with their owners. So they leave the cabin and they're outside for the first time. And they are interacting with like these woodland creatures. They see frogs and squirrels and chipmunks and fish, and there's like this whole musical number in the movie. And at one point, the toaster, he's just getting so overwhelmed by just all the chaos of nature after going, he's this toaster's been, just inside this cabin, pretty isolated, its whole existence. And interacting with just all these woodland creatures is just like really overwhelming the toaster. So the toaster runs away, hides, is alone. And then the next thing the toaster realizes, there's this flower. And this flower sees its reflection in the toaster and just falls in love with the toaster and just wants to be with the toaster. And in this scene, the toaster's talking to the flower and saying, "Oh no, I'm not a flower, I'm a toaster, don't stay over here. It's don't mistake me for a flower." And this flower is just beside itself. It's just enraptured with its reflection, not realizing that it's a reflection. It's never seen its reflection. It just thinks it's another flower. And it's like, lonesome no more. And the toaster finally just breaks away from the flower and runs away. And then it peers through the bushes to see what's happening. And he sees the flower and it's wilting and dying. And the toaster feels so bad and turns around and like walks away. And this whole scene lasts barely a minute, but like, oh God, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And you actually, like, you can find The Brave Little Toaster on YouTube to watch in length, but this scene is so powerful that it actually has its own video. And the comments, I was not the only one that was heartbroken by this poor little flower. And there's actually an interview with the creator of um, the film, and he talks about, oh, this really sad scene that I had forgotten about until I rewatched it last year, where Blanky is, Blanky is a blanket. The poster child of comfort. We talk about comfort blanket and whatnot, security blanket. And their first night staying outside in the wild, and they're not in the cabin, and the blanket is trying so hard to like cuddle with somebody. He's trying to cuddle with the lamp, cuddle with the toaster, cuddle with the vacuum, cuddle with the radio. Nobody wants to cuddle with the blankets. The blankets just tries to cuddle itself, and it's so sad. And he's just, this sad, lonely little creature whose entire existence is to give comfort and warmth, can't receive it himself. And the creator of the animated film was talking about how he purposefully had the animators color the flower the same color as the blanket, because he wanted that correlation of just that story of loneliness and yearning and desiring to, be with somebody who appreciates you and wants to be with you. And it's so sad. So when I discovered that this was based on a novella, I was so curious what that part in the movie was like in the book. And just like the never-ending story, the scene in the movie, it's devastating. And I mean, the comments, same as me, people were talking in the comments about how like that one scene with the flower just haunted them for decades, just like Artax succumbing to the swamps of sadness. But you don't see endless videos, memes, what have you, about people being devastated and traumatized for decades over Artax dying in the book, or the flower scene in the novella. So this is the flower scene in The Brave Little Toaster. There in a glade full of sunshine and flowers, the blanket was able to spread itself out on the grass and begin to get dry. The afternoon was wearing on, and the toaster had begun to feel, as all of us do at times, a definite need for solitude. Much as it liked its fellow appliances, it wasn't used to spending the entire day socializing. It longed to be off by itself, a moment to be private and think its own thoughts. So without saying anything to the others, it made its way to the farthest corner of the meadow and began to toast an imaginary muffin. That was always the best way to unwind when things got to be too much for it. The imaginary muffin. I just love that. Like, this toaster is so stressed out, so it goes off by itself and daydreams about toasting a muffin. I love it. I love it. I love it. The imaginary muffin had scarcely begun to warm before the toaster's reveries were interrupted by the gentlest of interrogatories. Charming flower, tell me do, what genera and species you belong to. I, as may be seen at once, am just a daisy, green of leaf and white of petal. You are neither green nor white nor blue nor any color I have known. In what Eden have you grown? Sprang you from earth or sky above? In either case, accept my love. Why, thank you, the toaster replied, addressing the daisy that was pressing its petaled face close to the toaster's gleaming chrome. It's kind of you to ask, but in fact, I'm not a flower at all. I'm an electric toaster. Flower, forbear, you can't deceive the being that adores you. Weave your thick black root with mine, O beautiful, O half divine. These fervent declarations so embarrassed the toaster that for a moment it was at a loss for words. It had never heard flowers speaking in their own language, and didn't realize how they would say any absurd thing that would help them to a rhyme. Flowers, as botanists well know, can only speak in verse. Daisies, being among the simpler flowers, characteristically employ a rough sort of octosyllabic doggerel, but more evolved species, especially those in the tropics, can produce sestinas, rondeaux, and villanelles of the highest order. The daisy was not, however, simply snared in its own rhyme scheme. It had genuinely fallen in love with the toaster, or rather with its own reflection in the toaster's side. Here was a flower, the daisy reflected, strangely like itself, and yet utterly unlike itself too. Such a paradox has often been the basis for the most impassioned love. The daisy writhed on its stem and fluttered its white petals as though in the grip of cyclone winds. The toaster, thoroughly alarmed by such immoderate behavior, said that it really was time to be getting back to its friends on the other side of the meadow. "Oh, stay, beloved blossom, stay! They say our lives are but a day. If that be true, how shall I bear to spend that brief day anywhere except with you? You are my light, my soil, my air. Stay but one night beside me here. I ask no more. Stay, lovely bloom. Let me adore those polished petals bright as the dew. When dawn attempts to rival you, that single perfect coiling root, imperishable, absolute. O beautiful, O half divine, wave your thick black root with mine." "Now really," said the toaster in a tone of gentle reprimand, "there's no cause to be carrying on like this. We scarcely know each other, and what's more, you seem to be under a misapprehension as to my nature. Can't you see that what you call my root is an electric cord? As to my petals, I can't think what you may mean, for I simply don't have any. Now I really must go and join my friends, for we are journeying to our master's apartment far, far away, and we shall never get there if we don't get a move on. Alas the day, and woe is me, I tremble in such misery as never flower knew before. If you must go, let me implore one parting boon, one final gift. Be merciful as you are swift, and pluck me from my native ground. Pluck me and take me where you're bound. I cannot live without you here. Then let your bosom be my bier." Feeling truly shocked by the daisy's suggestion, and seeing that the creature was deaf to reason, the toaster hastened to the other side of the meadow and began to urge his friends to set out at once on their journey. So we have two beings of nature, a horse and a flower, communicating with the protagonist, Atreyu and the brave little toaster. And the conversation in both the book and the novella ends with the horse and the flower telling the protagonist, like the flower is basically saying, kill me. If I can't be with you, then pluck me, kill me, and just and let your bosom be my bier. And Artax tells Atreyu, "For my last wish, can you just go away? And let me die. I don't want you to see me die." These are really sad situations, but you don't see people talking about being haunted for decades by the book and the novella. But you see so many memes, so many videos about the trauma people still carry over Artax dying in the movie. And you should read the comments in the YouTube video of the flower. There's just so many people saying, "Oh my God, this flower, this poor flower. I still think about that flower." And it's so interesting. I think, so my theory is, so obviously the easy explanation is music. The music that's played during the scene when Artax dies in the movie is very cueing. It just cues those heartstrings right up to just be plucked and just make the waterworks come. And same with the brave little toaster. The music that plays during that scene, very orchestral, very sweeping. The violins are just drawing those tears out. And we don't have that music when we're reading. But the other thing the other huge difference with the music also is they talk. Artax doesn't talk in the book, or Artax doesn't talk in the movie, and the flower doesn't talk in the movie. And it just creates, when you have a scene where there's no talking and the sound you hear instead is emotional music, I think people, we experience this a lot when we're watching foreign movies, or if we're watching a movie and there's a part where, there's a language being spoken we don't understand. There's this part in this Jim Jarmusch movie, Down by Law, where these three people, they're escaping from prison, and one gets left behind because he can't swim. And he's just lamenting. He's just like, there's this like scene where he's basically, he's just talking out loud to himself. And it's all in Italian. And there are no subtitles. And the music of the tone of his voice, you don't need the subtitles. You know what he's saying, even though you don't know what he's saying, because of the situation, because of the music of his voice. He's sad and very upset at being abandoned, and they end up coming back for him and like rescuing him, and again he's just like so happy and just overcome with joy and relief that they returned for him. And again, not subtitled and not necessary. You know what he's saying. And it's just, it just creates a more, it just opens this universal feeling of sadness. Because we all, you don't need, there's no language barrier to music, and there's no language barrier to emotions. And I think these scenes in these movies carry so much weight and just rest so heavily on us, because, I mean, imagine if that same scene were to take place, but Artax talked. It just wouldn't be the same. Like, remember the movie Incredible Journey, Michael J. Fox, Sally Field, I can't remember who's the Labrador, but there's a scene towards the end where, like, you think the Labrador is going to die, and it's sad, but not nearly as sad as Artax dying. And Artax doesn't talk, and the dog does. And it just kind of, I don't know, it removes this step. It takes away from that universality of it, if that makes sense. And I just find it so fascinating how we have multiple examples of this, where you can have the exact same situation, but if it's presented in this way or that way, it just resonates differently. We have a horse dying in the book, sad, but not traumatizing. And then we have the same scene where the horse dies in the movie, and it's so traumatizing. And just those little differences of, no talking. We don't have, these clunky words getting in the way of timeless emotion. And I just find it really interesting. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that ends the first part, where I'm talking about books. With that being said, read The Neverending Story. I don't think you'll be able, you can find a copy of this online, but it's very, very expensive. There is a PDF that you can just download and read if you're interested. I encourage you to do so. It's really good. And yeah, and The Princess Bride, the book. It's great. The ending. But yeah, you tell me, you read the book and you tell me if you also would have thought it was real, because it got me. And it's so funny, like, I don't even think he was intending to do that. It's been a long time, but I think that he was kind of like laughing at everybody and being like, oh my God, you people are so stupid. I might be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised because it is a pretty dopey thing. But I mean, come on, the guy just wrote so convincingly. And when you want to believe, you want to believe. So, but now we are going to move on to comics. Life drawing, Jaime Hernandez, of course. We are getting pretty close to the end here. So, OMG. So Vivian has been missing, and Jaime does this wacky thing that kind of bugged me. And at the same time, I couldn't really hold it against him because this man, he writes in such a true to life way. And things just happen so bing, bang, boom fast. And things that you think would just be so like, oh my God, they're actually pretty anticlimactic. And I love that because that's life. How many times have you experienced something where you had these expectations and then you finally see things come to fruition and it just doesn't hit the way you thought it would? It's just, for whatever reason, life is just so random and weird like that. And that happens in this, and we're going to get to that. So, Vivian has been missing. And, well, we find out she's alive. She's okay. Here's Vivian. And, of course, just getting into trouble, in trouble, getting out of trouble, and God knows how she got there. It's so crazy. So we see her, and she's in this situation. It looks like she's, fighting people off. And given the fact that it's Vivian, who knows? She might be fighting off villains, or and then you see here in the next panel, they push her out of the car, and she's furious, and they drive off and leave her in the dust. And it's just, you just never know with Vivian. Is she the villain? Are they the villain? Are they both villains? I don't know. And guess what? We never find out. How Vivian got to this situation, Jaime does not tell us. And it's kind of frustrating, but at the same time, we all know somebody where when this scenario happens, it's like, I don't even need to know what happened because I already know what happened, even though I don't know what happened. So don't even bother telling me. And like, this is what's going on here. So Vivian's stranded, and then this person pulls up next to her. And he says, some party, huh? And she says, all just pissy, your friends suck shit. And he says, they aren't my friends. I stumbled into that lame party, same as you. She goes, I don't know you, Igor. And he's like, oh, you can't be that drunk. You spent a whopping 2 hours bending my ear about how you ended up at that shitty party. And Vivian's like, so what? And then they just get into this tete-a-tete. They're just arguing back and forth. And so scene ends with them fighting because it's Vivian. And then we go to the next scene, and it's Maggie and Ray. And so we're just having a little back and forth dialogue. Oh, how was your day? So Maggie asks, how was your last day of school? And Ray says, fine. And Maggie says, oh, Tanta was sorry she missed it. She had to work today. It's her final semester, da-da-da. And Ray's like, uh-huh, okay, yep. And Maggie's like, is there something wrong? And Ray says, that depends. And he hands Maggie something. And Maggie's like, what do you mean? Did I get mail? He handed her an envelope. And Ray goes, it's for both of us. Read it. And Maggie's like, Ray, what? And he goes, just read it. And she goes, Ray, now I'm scared. What is it? He goes, it's nothing. Just read it. And so she opens it and she's like, oh, your brother's getting married. Ray, that's so nice. And he's like, uh-huh. And she's like, you don't approve? And he goes, read it again. She's like, Ray, I don't see what. And then she stops. And she goes, oh my God. And then she's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, waving the letter to him. And he says, I already read it. So she's like, Ray, I'm freaking out. And he's like, oh, just read it. And then she reads it. Like, oh, it's so nice. And then, and then, oh, so it turns out that letter was a wedding announcement. So, boom, we find Vivi. She's not dead. And she's arguing with this guy that she met at the party and bent his ear for 2 hours. And then, boom, Maggie and Ray. We get a letter in the mail. And it is, dun, 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 a wedding announcement for, it turns out that this man is Ray's brother. And so, Ray is about to be the brother-in-law to the frogmouth. And I just love how, like, just boom, boom, boom. Xaime just drops these bombs on us unapologetically. And then we rolled right into the wedding. Wedding Wallabaloo. Wedding Wallabaloo. I'm trying to remember. Wig Wham Bam. That's what it was. Early Love and Rockets. That's what it reminds me of. Wig Wham Bam. So, we're at the wedding now. And, of course, there's drama. Of course, there's a fight. And so Ray used to date Vivi. Maggie and Vivi used to have a thing. And now Vivi is marrying one of Ray's brothers. So it's just weird. And so Maggie braces herself and she's like, what does she say? Okay, just say congratulations and book it. No jokes, no hugs, no kissies, no fists. And she's making her way to Vivian to tell her congratulations. And classic Vivi, before Maggie can get a single word out, Vivian turns and says to her, jealousy's a disease. Get well soon. Oh my God, what a bitch. Look at this. Maggie getting ready, like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And now she's Vivi, and then look at that. Look at that shit. Oh my God. What a monster. And then something really sweet happens. Maggie says, I can't marry you now. You be related to the Velvet Foghorn on your own. And Ray says just a classic Ray line, bury me in my mismatched suit. And then Maggie and Ray are just kind of looking on at Igor and Vivi. And Maggie says, we really wouldn't have to change anything. Our life would pretty much stay the same. And Ray says, sure. And Maggie says, Maggie Dominguez. And Ray goes, you wouldn't have to change your name either, Miss Chascarrillo. And Maggie says, yes, I would. At least people can pronounce your last name. And Ray says, then I'd be honored, Mrs. Dominguez. And Maggie says, I think it's a good decision, Mr. Dominguez. And Ray says, I think it's a good decision for everybody. Even, and he trails off and looks at Vivian. And it's just so, it's funny and it's sad. Like here we are at Vivian's wedding. And she's just being so nasty to Maggie about, being jealous. But the jealous one is Vivian. And what I was talking about earlier about things being anticlimactic, you would think after all these years of reading Love and Rockets that when that moment came, when Maggie proposes, or when Ray proposes to Maggie, it would be this big thing. And it's not. It happens almost as an aside. And I don't know, it's really sweet. It just works. And I love how Jaime, so they're having this conversation about getting married, looking on. I'm like, we should, we can do that. And then look at this little detail. Ray kisses Maggie's hand, and there's just this tiny little heart there. And then look at that. Vivian, she's just so jealous. Even though it's her day, she's in the dress, she's the bride, but she knows the love Maggie and Ray have for each other. And, I'm not saying comparatively, it's just not a good idea to compare one couple's love to another. But I guess that's what we're going to do here. Vivian, she's just so nasty. You can't help but wonder what her agenda is. She didn't get, it's so hard to imagine that she actually did marry out of love. And you just, where's this relationship going to go? Because Igor is head over heels in love with Vivian, who, it's Vivian. Who knows what she really is thinking or feeling. And it's just so crazy. I remember when I was first reading about this coming out and reading that there was going to be a wedding, and then I had seen stuff on social media, parts from Vivian and Igor's wedding. I'm just like, oh my God, Vivian's getting married. This is crazy. And it's just, it's fascinating to me how the events that you think would take up so much story time and so much attention and focus. The wedding was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. And a lot of it is, conversations with the wedding guests. You don't really hear much of anything from Vivi. You hear a little bit from Igor as he's talking to his brothers about how they met. And even then, he doesn't really say much. He just talks about how Ray went out with her a few years ago and couldn't believe how hot she was. And I thought about her for years and years after that. And when I saw her at that party, I couldn't let her go. And that was that. Not much to it. It's just, yeah, it's interesting. Life is interesting. It's something I say a lot. I have a lot of gripes about life, but it's never boring. I would like it to be boring sometimes. But that is it for now. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because I got to get home to my kitty cats. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you guys later. Bye.